All right, everybody, welcome back from lunch. I hope you had some delicious food and that your first workshop went really well. We are going to transition into our second plenary session today. We're going to start off hearing from Dr. Kurt Steger, who's a local climate scientist, on one of our movies that we have here at the Wild Center. So we're going to watch The Age of Humans. It's about a 17-minute film. And then when that's over, we're going to have Dr. Rob Breen from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Office of Climate Change with us to talk a little bit about the Climate Act and New York State policy. So without further ado, we'll start the movie.
The Earth has seen a lot of changes in its long history. Back in the Mesozoic era, we had the age of dinosaurs. In the Pleistocene epoch, we had the age of ice, when great ice sheets crushed entire landscapes. Today, we're in a new chapter of Earth history, where we've become so numerous, our technology so powerful, and our lives so interconnected globally that we've become a force of nature on par with asteroids and ice ages. Scientists are coming up with a name for this new chapter in Earth history centered on human beings. It's called the Anthropocene epoch, which translates to the age of humans. One of the biggest changes we're making now in the age of humans is we're changing the chemistry of the atmosphere in ways that are changing the climate of the entire planet. There's a very strong scientific consensus based on many lines of strong scientific evidence that we are the dominant force behind climate change during the last half century. There's a lot of complicated science behind that, but basically, what you really need to know about it comes down to three things. One, it's real. Two, yes. And three, here.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Just a brief interlude.
The Earth has seen a lot of changes in its long history. Back in the Mesozoic era, we had the age of dinosaurs. In the Pleistocene epoch, we had the age of ice, when great ice sheets crushed entire landscapes. Today, we're in a new chapter of Earth history, where we've become so numerous, our technology so powerful, and our lives so interconnected globally that we've become a force of nature on par with asteroids and ice ages. Scientists are coming up with a name for this new chapter in Earth history centered on human beings. It's called the Anthropocene epoch, which translates to the age of humans. One of the biggest changes we're making now in the age of humans is we're changing the chemistry of the atmosphere in ways that are changing the climate of the entire planet. There's a very strong scientific consensus based on many lines of strong scientific evidence that we are the dominant force behind climate change during the last half century. There's a lot of
of technology. That's the promise and the hope of adaptation to climate change and of cutting our greenhouse gases and doing the work that we need to do for climate action. Because it's going to have a big effect where storms still thrive and survive and thrive in that world. Let's go ahead and start off with, do we have a, is this on its way?
It's on.
All right, there we go, okay. So what I'm going to be talking about today is what I call the gloom and bloom. You've heard these stories of climate change being gloom and doom, but I don't think that we should focus on the doom. We should really focus on the bloom of this, because there's some great opportunities for us. One thing to think about is there's some brokenness in the American democracy. We've had it for 200 years. We've had an ideal of what this is supposed to be and what we're supposed to do, but in the past, we haven't been able to achieve all of those ideals. We haven't become sustainable, we haven't had equity, we haven't had full democracy, we still have some major, major challenges. And when climate change unfolds in its fullness, it's going to challenge some of those pieces. And we're going to have to change. The opportunity right now, the bloom part of this is, we're going to have to change. We might as well change in a way that fixes the things that weren't working, and then we adapt other pieces of the way that we're living right now so that we are now in sync and create right relationship with nature and with other people. I'll do this. More technology. So let me start off also with a disclaimer. Although I'm here representing the Department of Environmental Conservation, I'm also going to offer a little bit of my personal insights from my professional educational background, so I'll spice it up. DEC stuff, we can present the science and the social science, and it's interesting, and you've got to do this, but oftentimes we human beings are actually designed for stories, and it's the stories that we tell, that we wrap around the science and the social science that helps us to transmit to other people. It gives us energy and excitement and passion to actually do the things that we need to do as people. And then, so as a disclaimer, not everything I say is necessarily the position of DEC, the state of New York, or the Office of Climate Change, so you'll have to figure out what those pieces are. Let me start off also with a story here. Once upon a time, there was a monkey going along a river, and of course, climate change is coming, so this river is really raging, lots of water just flowing all the place, splashing over the banks, and the monkey looks and says, "Oh no, those fish." And he runs over, jumps in the river, pulls the fish out, swims on shore, gets up to a tree and throws the fish in. He jumps in and gets some more fish out, and he throws them up in the tree. And somebody comes along and says, "Monkey, what are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm saving the fish from drowning." Okay. So the greatest intentions in the world, without being rooted in the science and the social science and the data and that, can be really dangerous, including for climate change. So let me give you an overview. So the gloom part of this here is, the reality is it's pretty gloomy. So the science, the social science shows climate change is going to have impacts in New York. It's already unfolding, it's already impacting, and they are not pretty. So I'm not going to make it pretty for you. It's already making some of those existing kind of legacy challenges that we've had, pollution, injustices, problems that we haven't solved in the past, it's going to make them even worse. The challenges of mobilizing the whole world to solve a global problem, it's really challenging. I don't know if you sat down on a Sunday morning and tried to call them all to get them at a meeting, really challenging. But also a thing that really is impacting young people is you're hit with all kinds of the science and the kind of the darkness of this, that gloom part. And it can be absolutely overwhelming. We're finding that climate anxiety is just making its way throughout the whole country, but actually the whole world. And young people are going, "Oh my God, this is what you're doing to my future." Well, we want to acknowledge that. That is a real challenge, but there is a path forward. So instead of this being the gloom and doom, I threw in here the gloom and bloom, and here's the positives. One is that we already have what we need to respond. We do have fantastic science already. We have fantastic social science about how people actually organize and how it's impacting them. And then we also have public policy, and I'll get to that in a second for those of you who haven't looked it up yet. Public policy is, what does it say? Oh, cool. All right, the 2 feet of climate action are a way that we can actually look at dealing with some of these legacy problems and how climate change is going to exacerbate those. New York State government, your government working for you in this democracy, is actually already taking some very, very important actions. And that's really, really good to hear. And we have these 2 feet of climate change action I'll talk about in a second, but they are an antidote for climate anxiety. Anxiety is when we hear all kinds of negative things coming toward us, we do not see a light at the end of the tunnel, and we don't know what to do about it. And so here's some things about where there's both hope, light at the end of the tunnel, and then what we can do about it. And then the key thing about this is, probably for the first time ever in US history, is we've got a challenge in front of us that we're not just turning over to one group of people, government leaders or business leaders or teachers. We are experiencing a problem that's going to require massive mobilization of people all over the planet, including, youth. You've heard this thing before, youth are the future. I don't buy that at all. That's old. That's 1960s stuff. Youth are today. You are not just the future, you are today. So you can mobilize and do stuff right now, walking out of this. The fact that you're here, you're already doing something to educate yourselves. We need youth today, right now, to do what you can do. All right, so let me tell you about this. You've heard this story, the goose that laid the golden eggs. So it was a story about there's a farmer and his wife, and they're just doing the normal thing, but they're really struggling, of course, in their little village financially because they're very, very poor, and there wasn't a way for them to make a whole lot of money, just kind of surviving day to day, egg by egg, as their chicken was laying eggs. And then one morning they got up and they went to get the one egg that they were going to split to have for their breakfast, and they noticed it wasn't a real egg that they were used to. They pulled this thing out, and it was gold. Now they're thinking, oh gosh, I didn't have my coffee this morning. Kind of trying to rub the gold off, what, and maybe something, he did something. And, very, very heavy. And they brought it into town, and they sold it. That money, they were able to build a better chicken coop, better house, thatched roof. They got some pots and pans, and then they noticed the very next day, another gold. And they sold it in the town, and they were able to actually do all kinds of improvements. And then they realized, boy, we could really do something really great if this chicken actually keeps eggs. And so they hired some people to actually work there, and they took that money, and they invested, and they started building up a huge farm. They're hiring tons of people and making lots of money. But then what typically happens with humans, or they go kind of turn a little bit to the dark side, and they got a little greedy, and they said, hey, you know what? We don't have to wait each day and kind of just get one every day. We can take that goose, and we can actually cut that goose open and take all of them out and just cash them in right now. So they do that. They go out with the axe. There goes the goose's head, and they open it up, and there are no. Back the next day, it's still dead. No eggs, no anything. And well, you can figure out the end of the story. Everybody's fired, things collapse, they killed their own, they don't even have an egg for breakfast. Eventually they lost everything. It's a little kind of sad story, but lesson of all great stories that we learn when as kids. All the things that all humans and everything else on the planet needs to survive and thrive. But if we do the damage and we try to take all of that out at once, it will no longer produce for us. And that's so I want to share that with you because it becomes a really important climate change story if you think about it, and it should be pretty easy for you to remember this. 3 crises in the modern world. We want to ground this in this. One is certainly lack of sustainability. So all the environmental issues that we're dealing with, we're actually using the Earth's resources in a way that's not sustainable. So we can't continue to sustain this. By the way, this also includes climate disruption, this lack of sustainability. The second one is we have some level of unfairness, this inequity and injustice. Not total equality in everything, but certainly equitable. People work a lot of time. They should get compensated for that. People who choose to work just a little bit of time, they should be compensated at that rate. That's fine. That's an equity equity issue. But there are people who are actually working really, really hard and harvesting sustainably out of the earth, and they're not able to benefit from that, or working in the economy. And we haven't figured out how to do that unfairness issue, address that. And the third one is really a modern thing that has happened as we've moved people away from the relationships with nature, and particularly in developed nations. We're dealing with this issue of the lack of meaning and purpose. And this is particularly prescient for young people, because there's no natural meaning coming out of your lives with your families and the history of like being on a piece of property, things that we had for a long, long, long time as humans have evolved in ecosystems. And this is part of what's the root of climate anxiety. We have to figure out what that meaning and purpose is for our lives. It gets us up in the morning, it gets us energized. When things get really tough, we know what our story is and what we're doing. We know what our meaning is. It's always important to know what's worth living for and what's worth dying for. And those kinds of answers to those questions are the things that give us meaning and purpose. And will help us to deal with climate anxiety. All right. So ways of addressing these three crises. Well, we're modern humans, so we use science to help us to figure out what's going on in our world. We also use the social sciences. Humans are a unique species, and we're structured in certain ways and behave in certain ways. So we use the social science to understand those problems. But then we use a thing called public policy. That allows us to solve these problems, particularly public problems. So you've seen the science, right? So we've got the Earth. We have to have a blanket around the Earth. Some amount of the sun's energy comes in. It warms up the Earth in just the perfect way to grow things and keep things alive and give us tans and whatever you do with the sun during the summertime. Well, maybe not so much here in the Adirondack, but you get a little bit of it. You know what I'm saying, anyway. And yet what we've done is as we've generated more greenhouse gases, they have made that blanket much, much, much thicker. And some amount of the heat that would bounce off back into the atmosphere or beyond, out into space, we've actually decreased that amount. More of it's being held in the Earth. And when you hear this talk about, well, we've increased the Earth's temperature 1 degree, and you think 1 degree, look, when it's up here and it's 32 degrees and now it's 33 degrees, that's not a really big deal. But if you think about it this way, how much heat would you actually have to generate to take the entire planet and heat it 1 degree? And that's what we're talking about. That 1 degree on the planet Earth can mean up in this area 10 to 15 degrees of a change. And that amount of heat energy is really huge. So that's the science. Okay? And then we have kind of similar social science. But let me jump right into this, into public policy. So what's public policy? Just to really kind of frame your mind around this and what we're going to focus on today. Easiest way to look at it, it's how to change the world. It's everything we put into place to really change the situation that we're in right now and make it better. So this is involving government partners. These are kind of the active members that are participating with government, active members of the public. It's a democracy, so it's citizens here, and all working together to both find and implement these solutions, the biggest problems that our society is facing. And very particularly, climate change policy is about solving the climate change problem, or problems as the case may be. So let's jump into a little bit of that policy. So New York State, we'll focus, of course, on New York State. Some main sources of greenhouse gases, this are science and policy are going to be shaped by this. We look at, you can look at the graphic here, but buildings, transportation, electricity, waste, industry, and agriculture is the ways that we actually entered into relationships with our Earth, and these are the sources, ultimately, of greenhouse gases that are contributing toward making the Earth's blanket in the atmosphere much thicker. And so you've seen some of the science too, but as temperatures rise, it's in sync with as the greenhouse gases rise, and we see it continually rise. By the way, you'll notice over here on the one on the right, we had a little bit of a drop when the entire planet was hit by COVID, and everybody stopped doing what they did in the economy for quite some time. We're buying so many things, and there was a little teeny blip. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh no, we have to have like 400 COVIDs in order for us to get this down. It's not going to work very well. It's not a great way to do it, by the way. And so it really is a challenge, right? What do we need to do? Okay. And so we're already seeing these impacts of climate change. These are already unfolding. We used to talk about climate change being sometime in the future. It's already happening, and it's very, very serious in a lot of places already. And you may have even experienced it. I certainly have experienced it. I live down in the Albany area, in a rural area. My wife and I moved off out of the city, and we moved into a rural area so that we could really deal with some of these climate change issues and raise our kids with awareness of sustainability. And so what we did is we bought an old goat farm, and we restored that, and our kids are actually learning all about this. this and ways that we can adjust our lives. And already climate change has impacted. We lost several fruit trees that we had planted because they couldn't adapt to the rapid change in freezing temperatures and then really warm temperatures right in the middle of January and February, and our trees actually just died. They just couldn't handle that, couldn't adapt. And we have all kinds of different flooding issues that are going on, but it keeps us really real and focused on these real issues as they're unfolding. And that's on a personal level. But on a professional level, we're looking at these kinds of impacts. We're certainly seeing, with just a 1.1, it's a 1.1 average increase on the planet Earth, but already because of that, we're seeing higher temperatures in places, especially during winter times. We're seeing increased precipitation. And particularly what's happening is we used to get like moderate rain that was happening. We'd have an inch here and a storm a couple days later, an inch here. And now what's happening is we have a storm where 4, 5, 6, up to 8 inches are coming down, this huge event. And then this long period where no rain at all. So even if you think about the water cycle with the same amount of water, but it's just distributed and dumped on the planet Earth in different ways, can create all kinds of problems with flooding. We have more frequent drought then as a result of this. Sea level rise as waters actually enter into the ocean actually rises, and as we're melting, seeing glacial ice melt, it's actually increasing, and as water actually warms, it expands. So in coastal areas, we're a little protected from that here, but we're not insulated from it because, as you probably all know, all the ships that come into the port of New York bring all the goodies that we buy in our normal lives, even up here. So what happens in New York City with sea level rise very much impacts the quality of life for people who are here right now. But more extreme events, that storm that we did, the activity we just did, so floods, extreme heat waves, ice, snow, winds, coastal storms. We've even got increases in diseases and pests, and even pandemics are related to increases of diseases and pests coming into human communities. But wildfires and smokes, we had a lot of smoke this summer because of Canadian wildfires. Stressed and failing infrastructure that were built assuming that the climate was going to be stable forever. And now we have increased temperatures and changes in temperatures and precipitation, and our infrastructure, our bridges, our roads weren't built for those. I was in Ireland back in May, and they had a heat wave. Now, for Ireland, a heat wave is when it gets to 80, but you know. But for them, they had adapted to a much more mild temperature, and all of their infrastructure was built on that very kind of finite area where they had their temperatures laying. And a whole lot of people lost their internet connection. Like, what's going on? It got hot, hot 80 degrees. Well, they had designed all of their Wi-Fi equipment with technology that said it was going to be within that temperature range. And when it got to 80, the plastic actually expanded and moved all these parts all over the place and all of their Wi-Fi equipment. Nobody ever thought about, oh my God, we lose Wi-Fi because it gets 80 degrees in Ireland? Yep, those are things that we hadn't thought about. All kinds of new things that are beginning to unfold. Loss of food crops and livestock impacts on forestry in this area. Increase in human health risks as people are exposed to all of these things. Overheated oceans and where the fish and marine mammals are going to go as they're migrating through that. And then the migration, certainly of fish, wildlife, insect species trying to adapt themselves. And then human migration, people moving, huge numbers of people getting impacted in a community and needing to find new places to live. And we're hearing stories already in New York of migrants and our challenges of very rapidly trying to rehouse and employ people in communities when they just show up overnight. We've got 1,000 new people that they have to address. So in essence, kind of summarizing this, New York over time, by the end of the century, will be a whole lot more like places down in the South, all right? And so that kind of a climate, we're going to have to figure out how to get New York to that place. And so the public policy becomes extremely important. We have a New York State climate assessment that was really looking at the sciences and how it interfaces with the social science. It's just about to come out. We're hoping that even by this time in the year we'd have this out, but most of it's actually done and we're just about to release it. But some of the climate assessments that are already out, some fundamental key messages that climate change is going to and is already in the process of fundamentally reshaping life on Earth. And then already areas with lower incomes, people who are really struggling to survive already, they're the ones who are going to be the first ones being impacted by the serious impacts of climate change. All right? And there's some racial overtones to that. Climate actions right now, our response globally, don't yet approach the scale considered necessary to address this. So our public policies globally are not yet cutting the mustard. However, there still is some hope, what we're doing in New York. And then ultimately the IPCC, which is an international body which actually puts together the science and social science of climate change to get this disseminated all through the whole planet. The leading scientists and social scientists from the planet Earth are coming together to do this work, which is a sign of hope. They said, without urgent, effective, and equitable mitigation and adaptation actions, Climate change increasingly threatens ecosystems, biodiversity, and the livelihoods, health, and well-being of current and future generations. Notice that current and future generations insert youth from here, right there. High confidence. We're at 1.5 degrees of warming. We're on our way to getting there. It's going to trigger some feedback loops of things that once one thing happens, another thing happens as a result, another thing and another thing. And these feedback loops coming in. The risks all over the planet of these impacts are much higher at 2 degrees warming. Now that's a little bit further down the road, but we're on the trajectory to get there. And there's a gap there, and on our current track, we're going to emit enough greenhouse gases by 2030 to make getting some of those targets really difficult or impossible. So these are real challenges for public policy. And then some amount, I don't know if you knew this part, but some amount of additional future change is now inevitable. It's already baked into the system from what we had done back in the 1800s is now one of the things that it's actually changing the climate. And we can't go back and actually undo some of that. What we're going to have to do is not only get our emissions down to zero, but we're going to have to find some technologies or some natural ways that the Earth will actually extract the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at rates that will actually start pulling that temperature down over time. So we're trying to figure this out. But some amount we're going to have to adapt to. It is inevitable, and that's part of the challenge for us in public policy. So just some of the numbers. The great hopeful thing, by the way, you see where the pink area is. If we didn't do anything for climate change, that's where we're going to go, up to 5-degree change. Now, there's no way in modern human civilization can actually survive that. We don't know how humans could do that. We have no solution for that. The positive is we don't have to worry about that because we're not going there. We already know. We've done the science. We've already done some great actions, and we've been able to reduce those successfully. You can see, by the way, where we are today, and that's where there's all kinds of trajectories and unknowns. Depending on what we do and how we respond depends on where we go with this. Now, we do need to get to the lowest levels. That 1.5-degree pathway down at the bottom, that's still an increase in what we are. We're at 1.1 right now, and we're already seeing these impacts. At 1.5, that's still some pretty serious stuff. And at 2 degrees, it is much, much worse. And all of our strategies right now and policies are to keep it to about 2 degrees or 1.5. So we're still going to have some amount that we're going to adapt to. What we want to think about is the amount of time it's going to take us to put these changes into place. It's going to affect my generation, but I'm, well, at least a few months older than most people in the room. A few months. And so some of these things I'm going to bypass, but it still is my responsibility because I have kids. And I have kids both your age all the way down to much younger, too. We took our time raising our family, by the way. And so it affects generations. And I'm most concerned about this issue, that there are people right now making decisions that they're going to age out of. We're going to be gone. And what we're leaving is for the next generation to figure it out. No money, no resources, or limited money and resources for bigger problems and more expensive. And I've got a problem. It's called intergenerational equity. Okay? And I've got a problem, and that's why we want to focus also on engaging youth, saying, what do you want for your future? So in New York, we respond, we call it the 2 feet of climate action. How do we move forward? So mitigation, well, you hear the word mitigation, technical term, but what it means, we want to mitigate. We want to solve this by cutting our greenhouse gases. So New York State is focusing very heavily on cutting our greenhouse gases, everything we can do to cut those gases. But we also have to do with the second foot adaptation. It's the 2 feet. There's some amount that's already baked in. We're going to have to adapt to what's already baked into the system. All right? So if you think about that image that we had before, the first part of mitigation right there is really focusing those policies to reduce it, to get it down to 2.0 degree change or 1.5. And then we have mitigation. And mitigation is focused on this part, adaptation. And then how do we adapt to that changing world under climate change? By the way, we can put these together. Some of the actions that we're going to do actually do both adaptation and mitigation. We install green infrastructure. Notice, by the way, the hint here is actually there's a lot of nature things that we can do. And it's all around us, our solutions. But installing green infrastructure. When we do solar storage, when there's storms and you've got solar power and the grid goes out and you're running on solar, guess what? You actually have some energy resilience. But it also helps to cut greenhouse gases. Resilient transportation, when all the gas supplies are actually disrupted. If your car runs on electricity, it just doesn't affect you. You're more resilient with your transportation. So there's a variety of these different things that we can actually do. Some of them are going to be for adaptation, some are mitigation, and some do both. So let's take a look at what your leaders in New York State are actually doing. We have, as I had said, we have a climate impacts assessment. So this is actually looking at the science of what's going on. We have the best scientists, best minds coming together to look at this stuff, both the science and the social science, to explore what we need to do and make recommendations for how to go forward. It's expected to be released this year. But we passed 2 laws. Back in 2014, the Community Risk and Resiliency Act. So what happens is we come up with some great ideas for what we should do about this. Then the people that we vote into office come together and they take those ideas and they turn it into a piece of legislation. And the legislation says this is what New York State government will do on behalf of the people. We collect taxes from people and we apply that towards solving these problems. So in 2014, they did pass this legislation. It required the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to look at sea level rise and say this is definitely where sea level rise is going to be. But we have some projections. There's some uncertainty with that, but we actually know that sea level is going to rise. So it's those projections. We created some model local laws, how to help local communities pass their own laws so that they can begin to adapt to climate change. All kinds of permits and things that we do, we now have to make sure that the climate science is included in every action, every thought, every program, every initiative that we're doing. We have to incorporate that in there. And then we're developing guidance for how communities can adapt, people can adapt, businesses can adapt. And then most recently, in 2019, we passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or we just called the Climate Act. And what this does is it set very serious, world-leading, nation-leading goals for what we are going to do to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And it set these very serious targets, and we are moving very rapidly to do this, but there's some really serious challenges of actually converting our energy system from a fossil fuel-based system over into an electric-based system and using renewable energies. So we're doing offshore wind, we're doing distributed solar, we're doing energy storage, so think about batteries, so times when we're actually storing that, so at night when there's actually no solar, we can actually draw that solar energy that's been stored in batteries. We're doing all kinds of things to make this transition, and the law also says we've got some equity issues that we want to address at the same time. So we want to make sure environmental justice communities or disadvantaged communities are fully engaged in this and they're getting the benefits too and sharing those benefits with everybody else. And then out of that CLCPA, or the Climate Act, we put together a Climate Action Council, some of the best minds for kind of leadership, and they pulled together what's called the Scoping Plan. And they reached out to all kinds of different communities. They got everybody involved in all different levels, and they came up with recommended policies, and we're now in the process of implementing. And this is a huge, long document, but it's available to anybody here. You can jump on the internet and actually find this, and it has some real concrete solutions for how we're moving forward on this, and to do it in equitable ways. You will notice in there are a couple pieces that say we need to get young people involved, and here's some things that young people can do. You'll notice that there's probably somebody in this room who actually influenced that. But anyway, so that is in there. There are lots of other people that are really concerned about these intergenerational equity issues. And one of the most important things that we have in New York State as far as our policies go is we have what are called climate-smart communities. And we want to approach this in a way that not only does New York State government work on these issues, but we partner also with local governments. So you have a local government, it's either town or it's your counties, cities, villages, and we engage those folks because that's where people are living. And climate-smart community is a way of taking our resources and all this information that we're generating, the science, the social science, these policies, and getting them down to communities, help them to do their own planning, implementation of these strategies. And a little bit of this is where you come in, because this is where you're located, where you're probably going to have the most opportunities with climate-smart communities. And if you do become, in your local community, a climate-smart community, you can actually take these actions and be certified as a climate-smart community. And these actions will allow you to make incremental progress toward this, and then you get to show the whole world, we're doing something, we take this seriously. We're taking the 2 feet of climate action, and we're doing it here in our community, and our youth get to be involved in this. Some of the benefits of being part of a climate-smart community, if you don't know anything about the climate science or social science or the policies, which is just as important, we offer the free technical assistance, and that simply means getting the science, social science, and resources out, accessing some funding. We have climate-smart communities coordinators, professionals that actually go into the communities and help to do planning and to mobilize groups and teams to actually participate. And they do both climate adaptation planning and climate mitigation planning for both reducing the greenhouse gases and then also adapting to the amount of climate change that's already baked into the system. We provide guidance and tools. And they also provide funding. So if you're in a community that just doesn't have a lot of resources, we can provide some funding through our grants. And so there are also some roles for members of the public to get involved in the climate smart communities, and that includes youth. So you can actually serve on your local climate smart community committee. And we use the science and the social science to do this. And then that community will actually develop public policy solutions, which means things that we all do together to actually solve some of this stuff. And then you can actually work to develop and implement your climate action plans with mitigation and adaptation actions. And you'll see that we have tons of pictures of communities actually mobilizing and doing work on climate smart communities initiatives in the local communities. It's time for another story. You've heard this story, the three little pigs. But it's a little bit different for climate change. So once upon a time, there were three little pigs, and they said, oh, we heard these reports and stuff on the news and everything. They said, climate's kind of coming, and it's going to challenge us, and we've got to have a new place to live, because where we're living is just going to be, really dangerous. The first little pig goes, climate schmeimet? I don't think so. I don't look at that. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but scientists aren't like really that smart, are they? Look at the world right now. It's sunny. I don't know. He was a doubt. I was like, okay, I'm just going to put together my house. I've always liked the house that I've done. It's very cheap, it's very efficient, and I can take my money and go get like all kinds of fun things and celebrate and have little toys. So I just put a little bit of money into my house and built a little house of straw. Well, that's great. Okay. And so the second pig says, yeah, that's probably not wise. I think that we really need to do something really important. But what's the least amount that I could do? Well, instead of straw, let's just make this out of sticks. They're heavier, they're thicker, they can withstand more wind. Yeah, that's the least I can do. Okay, so I've done it. Here's my house. Took a little bit longer, a little bit more money. I still have some money to play with, but yeah, it's good enough. Come on. Third little pig, she was a bright girl. She said, that's not what the science says. That's not what social science says. My two brothers, by the way. We need that wisdom, right? And so she says, this is what the science is, this is what social science says. And I actually talked to my friends, and we talked about this. This is serious stuff. And we talked to some parents, they're still in our lives. And then we talked to other people in this whole network. And look, we're not totally sure there's some uncertainties, but if this is real, and they say that it is, we really need to take this seriously. So they got together, and they drew up plans, and they said, hey, let's make it up. No, that'll never withstand this. They said floods, okay. And they came together, and she brought people together, and they built this beautiful house, well-designed. It's got solar panels, a little bit of wind on the side. It's adapted for floods. If floods come, it's out of the flood zone. All these great things to make this house, yes, they've mitigated and adapted for climate change. So it's adaptive, right? It's resilient. Sure enough, the storms came. And they all ran into their houses going, we'll be ready. And they named, of course, this first storm hitting this community. Yes, it was called by the Weather Service, National Weather Service, the Big Bad Wolf. Yes, Wolf Storm. Wolf Storm comes in, and it blows on that first one. Just within first 10 minutes, whoosh, and there goes the straw. And Pig's been missing for a long time. We're not sure what happened to Pig. But pig number 2, he said, you know what, this storm actually was okay. I survived, but it really did some serious damage on this. Oh, there's a lot of straw down there where my brother's thing. So I'm going to get that, and I'm going to stick it in around here, and I'm just going to use some of this. And so the next storm, so Wolf 2 came a couple weeks later. And guess what? It was a more serious storm, much bigger. And that second building went down, boom. And little pig had to move in with his sister, who didn't say, I told you so. Well, with her words, she didn't say that, but with her eyes, he knew what she said. She said, come on and live with me. And they sat there, and they listened to the storm beating on this house. And several of their friends were actually there because they said, look, our houses aren't finished yet, but we know that this actually is a place that still has internet access. It still has energy. We can still cook food. You've got tons of food down in your cellar that you stored up just in case. You've had these gardens and everything. We're going to be okay. Sure enough, storm came in. It was not pretty. It did lots of damage all around. But it's true. The house actually was made resilient. They worked together as the storm came through. They came out of the storm. They still had food. They invited their neighbors over. They could recharge. They actually shared plans and ideas, shared some food, made sure they had access to some water and all kinds of things. And so here's the story of the 3 little pigs and the wisdom of the 3 little pigs. And it's going to take a community, it's going to take some real serious thinking, it's going to take focus on the science and the social science, it's going to take a lot of collaboration, and yes, men and women and young people and old people all working together to do the things that we need to do. And we can't stand back and just say, what's the least I can do? We can't stand back and say, climate schmimate, yeah, it's going to have ramifications for people like that. We want to be like that third little pig. So let's take a look at maybe some roles for youth. We're really at the tail end, but I want to throw some things out because we said it's gloom and bloom. And so here's some of the bloom stuff. He says, there we go. So here's some of the bloom stuff. I was driving up and I had a series of these, and all of a sudden I was driving up from Albany, and all these incredible ideas just started coming to me. I was like, oh my gosh, we can talk about this and this and this. But on a personal level, there's some things that you can do. You've got some climate anxiety. We're worried about this stuff. There's some personal things that you can do. So one is just getting informed. Just know the science and the social science. Read this stuff. It's available for you. You can actually, just look it up on the internet. But read. You can read both the, technical stuff, but you can also read even cli-fi. These are it's kind of science fiction focused on climate change. You can use those because they really incorporate a lot of the science in it if you're a person who gets into that. Read, watch videos. You can even do the arts. If you're a person who actually says, look, I don't know if I can make a huge amount of difference with getting engaged in climate policy, but I want to get the word out to people in my generation, and we're kind of media heavy here. You can write songs and poems that you share with people. Do a dance. Figure this out. Incorporate climate change in it. Really creative. Because people pick that up and they spread that. And you know that happens. Maybe listening to some podcasts. You can even do it by playing games. There are tons of climate games out there. Search them. Search them out. Bring people over and say, we're going to play these climate change games. Some of them are digital, but not all of them are. And even playing games can help you to become literate and actually get people together and actually focus on this. Some things you can even do is kind of just do a self-audit on your own lifestyle. Are the things that you're doing that are really high impact on the earth and have a really high carbon footprint? Think about those things, but go beyond that, because the real answer to that is not in any individual person's efforts. If you actually do those kinds of things and then you watch the numbers on climate change, your little activity is not going to make that thing drop, just so that you all know. We all know that, right? It is you doing that and then bringing your friends together and families together and talking about spreading it, because people, it's never data that changes people, really. It's people that change people. So what we need more people, not necessarily more science and data. We need that. We do need that because we need to know what we're doing so we aren't monkey saving fish from drowning, right? But it's people have the opportunity to transform the hearts of our friends and our families and getting out there in the public. And you can imagine what happens. There's a bunch of stodgy old adults. They don't look exactly like me because I'm not stodgy, but there are stodgy adults getting together and they're doing this kind of boring stuff. There's the science, you got to do some public policy. Boy, it's getting really tough stuff. You got to do this heavy work. And a young person comes in and says, let me show you, I'm going to read a poem to you that I wrote, and I'm going to play a song that I wrote. And then my friends are going to do this dance. And we want to tell you how important this is to us. And there's like this depth of emotion that gets poured into this, and these adults are just in there going, oh my God, we need to take it seriously for these guys. And I've seen it happen time and time again because people really do care about your lives and what's going on with you. And you can transform even stodgy old adults and give them energy and inspiration. The things that you can do at home. You can do a home audit. Get your whole family together and do a family audit at home of carbon, carbon impacts. Look at how you use your yard. Are there ways to plant trees and gardens in your yard? Talk about this over dinner with your family. Invite other families over and friends over for your dinner and have these good conversations. In the community, join your Climate Smart Community Committee. You can work on a conservation advisory council as a young person. They have a stipulation that says once you turn 16, you can actually be an active member in these things. You can actually get a job or a volunteer opportunity in your community where you're doing something about climate change and doing some actions. You can even, as a young person in New York State, start a business, a green business that actually does something. Even think about landscaping. Somebody says, I need you to do blah, 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 and you say, landscaping, that's going to actually contribute to increased carbon. I don't do it that way. I do it this way, and apply some of the green technologies that are low carbon ways of even doing landscaping. Things that you can do in school. Start a climate club. My goodness, what an easy thing that you can do. Bring people together to do this and focus on maybe the footprint of the entire school. Maybe there's an opportunity for taking an online class to incorporate into what's going on. If you're doing assignments, make sure that your assignments get an opportunity to plug in a little bit of climate science. You learn a little bit for every assignment that you're doing. Maybe there's a final report you can do and do it on some climate change stuff. You can even look at your school grounds and say, we could plant trees and gardens and those kinds of things. Right? So let me give you some final things, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A, so you have some opportunity for this. So climate anxiety does drop whenever there is hope, whenever there is when there are solutions and plans, and when we take action. Okay? The least I can do, like the little pig, that never works. We're not looking at the least we can do. And there's never just one little thing I can do that's going to solve it. It's never going to be enough. Okay? We can't buy our way out of this. Oh, I'll just buy this green product. Everything will be okay. No, that's to make you feel good. That's not actually to solve the climate problem. We're not going to buy our way into this. Okay? Technology can be used, but it's not the full solution. We do need technology, but we also need nature, which can do some amazing things to protect us. That was technology that did that. That wasn't nature that did that. Okay? And then also humans with our behaviors and our stories, the right stories, can mobilize people for action. Okay? And it's going to take 2 feet. We have to cut our greenhouse gas emissions, cut our carbon, but we also have to adapt at the same time. It's those 2 feet. And so it is a gloom and bloom. It's not gloom and doom. It is a gloom and bloom. There's some really serious negative stuff, but what we can do about it is the bloom stuff, and we can engage one another. And if we ask our brain, why is this going on? It's kind of silly. The science has already told us, social science tells us. The question we ask our brains is, what can we do about it? And just sit there on a Saturday afternoon, you have nothing to do, you're getting a little bit anxious about climate stuff and the stuff you're learning. Ask your brain, what can we do about it? We went to that climate thing, what can we do about it? And your brain is actually designed, like all human brains, for problem solving. And if it means, by the way, you pick up a phone and talk to one of those pigs, you can do that too, right? But we can actually set our brains to problem solving. It'll come up with some solutions for you. All right? All right, and we want to create some opportunities now for doing some Q&A.
All right, thank you, Rob. Rob, you didn't get an official introduction, so I just want everyone to know Rob's here from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Office of Climate Change, and literally everything that Rob just talked about is going to be addressed in one of the workshops that's happening this afternoon. So you're really going to get to dig a little bit deeper into some of these solutions. I know right now you're supposed to be in your second workshop. We're going to push things a little bit so we can have a tiny bit of Q&A with Rob, because I know you probably have questions for him. So we're going to take the next 5 minutes to do Q&A, and then we have a couple super quick announcements, and we'll send you on your way to your workshop spaces to be there by 2. All right? So we need your cooperation to move quickly here. But yeah, we'll take a couple questions.
Do you want to run out with a mic? Or
Yep.
Okay, so you pull a mic out. I'll stand in front of this so you can actually hear me.
You talked a lot about what New York State is doing. Are there any multi-state efforts that you could highlight for us about what states are cooperating together to do?
Yes, I'll actually give you one example. It's actually a fantastic experience. You all may have known that there were some previous presidential administrations. We don't get into politics here, but one of their strategies was we weren't going to be so focused on climate policies. And at the state level, several states said that's not acceptable for where we're going. So New York State and the previous governor actually said, we're going to actually mobilize states to do our own action together. And so we created the Climate Alliance, and we brought states together to work very actively to get all the states. So again, not what New York does, because that's not going to even make a blip in that, but multiple states, the United States mobilizing. So the Climate Action, the Climate Alliance is one that actually we brought people together to develop tools and to work together with the same kinds of policies. Yeah.
You got a lot of really great graphics and a lot of things you didn't have time to touch on in this presentation.
Well, just to let you know, so I'm a poor public servant, so I'll be standing outside for $35 a copy. No, just joking. Yeah, I can make that available, absolutely.
Oh, right here.
There's another question.
We'll take this one over here.
Okay, and then we're going to go here.
Oh, thank you. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, it works. Let's say we're too young to make businesses and we don't really have I guess a lot of friends or families to connect and stuff. If we do something little like plant a tree or plant 2 or plant 3, 4, 5, does those things still matter?
Every little bit that we do matters in some way. By the way, you're not too young to start a business, just so that you know, because there are lots of young people around the United States who are running a business. My daughter is one of them. She wanted to do something, so she makes sustainable products by hand and then sells them at a farmer's market. I subsidize her a little bit, but she hasn't made huge amounts of money. But even those kinds of things are ways to do it. And then she communicates as people come to buy her products, this is all sustainable wool, and it's produced here and that kind of stuff. So young people can start a business, and if you want some more information on it, you can get some more information. But every little thing matters, because what it does is it means I'm a person, I don't know, I can't have all this influence in the world, but the little world that I can operate in means I've actually learned about something, I've applied the practice, I learned how to plant a tree, and that's what I can do right now. But it's what I do later then. And I talk to my friends and say, hey, can we do one in your yard? Can we do one in your yard? And then they're into it. And then we can go to the school and say, look, I've done this in my yard. She's done it in her yard. He's done it in his yard. Can we do it in school? And just know that every time there's an opportunity to do one little thing, it can snowball into many things. And it's the many things that have the tremendous impact. But start small with one thing and continue it.
So I was wondering, if we kept on going with that pink line you showed, what would the Earth look like if we didn't do anything to help it?
Nobody that I know of has actually done the science of what the Earth looks like, because as we started getting halfway there, nothing that we actually plan in a civilized world operates in that kind of a system. The food systems get changed, water systems get changed, and so one of the things that's really helpful to know is we're not going to go there. There's not a way, there's no trajectory for us getting there, because we have made changes, and that's the real positive thing. I suppose you can read some science fiction about it, but we're not going there, and so we're not so worried about it.
How do I
There we go.
How do I figure out how I could find a climate group in my city?
So, what most people do today is you jump on the internet and you can find almost everything there, but also by word of mouth. There are people who are involved in things, so just being in the right place and talking and connecting with people. I would say a great way to start is even with a climate smart community coordinator. You jump online, you find these folks, they're great resources, and they tend to know what's going on in the communities. But even teachers may know, and if teachers don't know, the teachers can reach out and find people who do know and bring it in. So reach out to whomever you can talk to has more resources than you, and bring those resources in. And if there isn't one in your community, well, there you go. You know what you need to do. You start one, right? All right.
We're actually about to talk about climate smart communities right now. I'm so glad that was the last question here. Thank you so much, Rob. That was incredible. We love Rob. Rob's amazing. Go, Rob. Okay, so Rob just talked a lot about climate smart communities, which is awesome. And this is a program that young people in this room who live in communities have participated in the past. So if you're from Homer, raise your hand. Yes, awesome. Homer, Lake Placid, raise your hand. Saranac Lake. All of those communities have had young people involved in their climate smart communities, task forces, and the actions that they've done, and getting their communities registered and certified. And so I'm actually going to show you right now how you can get to a web page on our Wild Center website that is a landing page for a new youth guide, a new youth climate smart communities guide that was co-developed with some people who are in this room. Raise your hand if you provided comment or helped with this guide. Amazing, yes. And a special shout out to Dazzle from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Office of Climate Change, and Carly Leary, our regional climate smart community coordinator, who are both in the room and helped with this guide. But I just want to show you how to navigate to this page. And if this is something you're really excited about, go to the Climate Smart Communities workshop, which is in the last workshop block today. So you're going to go to wildcenter.org, and I'll show you how to navigate there. You're going to go to Our Work, Youth Climate Program, scroll down right here, Forces for Change, Youth and the New York State Climate Smart Communities. This is our guide's title. And you can learn more about New York State Climate Smart Communities program here. We have this amazing video that highlights some of the young people who have been involved in climate smart communities. And then here's the guide right here. We're actually rolling this out for the first time today. So you will all be the first people to see this. It's really exciting. And you can click here, learn more, and this will bring you right to the guide. So here's the awesome cover, and you can see our table of contents, some of the things that are highlighted in this guide. So please, if you're interested in learning more about this program, we encourage you to go to the Climate Smart Communities Workshop, last workshop block. Okay, so it is 1:59. We are going to scoot to our next workshops really quickly. 3:15, there's a break for 15 minutes, and then your next workshop block. We'll meet back here at 5.